Yemen sits at the southwest corner of the Arabian Peninsula, where Asia narrows toward Africa and the Red Sea tightens into a strait. It is not large by continental standards, yet its terrain folds, rises, and fractures with a variety of far bigger land. Mountains climb abruptly from coastal heat. Deserts spread thin and pale. Old cities cling to rock. And between them all runs a history that has rarely known rest. How did one of the oldest inhabited regions on Earth?
So if you want more journeys into the unforgiving, the beautiful, and the unknown, subscribe. Hit that button and join us as we explore the places that don't fit on postcards.
Become one of its most fragile frontiers. From above, Yemen looks broken into pieces. The western highlands rise fast from the Tahama coastal plain, a green-brown wall that catches what little moisture the region receives. These mountains are cooler than the coast, sometimes cold at night, and carved into terraces built stone by stone over centuries. Water here is not abundant, but it is managed, guided, trapped, and reused. Long before modern states, farmers shaped entire slopes to hold soil and rain. Agriculture in Yemen is not an industry. It is survival engineered into land. Beyond the highlands, the terrain falls eastward into emptiness. The edge of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, reaches into Yemen as a vast, inhospitable interior. Few people live there. Fewer pass through. It is a landscape that resists roads and erases tracks, a reminder that much of Yemen has always existed at the margins of control. At the heart of the highlands lies Sana'a, one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities. Its skyline is vertical, not with glass or steel, but with earth. Tower houses rise several stories high, built of mud, brick, and stone, edged with white gypsum patterns that look drawn by hand. These are not ruins or reconstructions. People still live inside them. Children play in their shadows. Markets operate as they have for generations. Sana'a feels less like a preserved past than a present that never surrendered to time. But Yemen's story is far older than its cities. Long before Islam, this land was home to powerful kingdoms, Saba, Himyar, Kataban, names that echo faintly now. These states grew rich not from conquest, but from control of trade. Yemen stood at the crossroads of the ancient incense routes, exporting frankincense and myrrh north to the Mediterranean and east to India. Wealth moved slowly, carried by caravans and ships, but moved through Yemen all the same. For centuries, this was not a peripheral land. It was central. That legacy is still visible in places like Marib. Once the capital of the Sabaean kingdom, Marib was sustained by one of the ancient world's great engineering feats, a massive dam that captured seasonal floods and turned desert into farmland. When it failed, centuries later, populations dispersed. Power shifted. The land dried. In Yemen, infrastructure has always meant destiny. Islam reached Yemen during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, and the region became one of the earliest adopters of the new faith. But unity was never simple. Geography fractured authority, and belief took local forms. In the northern highlands, Zaydi Islam developed its own traditions, shaping politics as much as theology. In the south and along the coast, different schools prevailed. Yemen was Muslim early, but never monolithic. Foreign powers arrived by sea. The Portuguese tested the Red Sea routes. The Ottomans pushed in from the north, drawn by Yemen's strategic position near the Bab al-Mandab Strait, the narrow maritime gate between the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. Controlling this passage meant influence over global trade. Yemen was no longer just a land to cross. It was a choke point to hold. In the 19th century, the British arrived, anchoring themselves in Aden. Aden was a port, a coaling station, and later an artery of empire. Ships stopped here not for culture or conquest, but for fuel and water. The city became outward-facing, tied to the rhythms of maritime trade rather than mountain agriculture. Even today, Aden feels different from Sana'a, flatter, faster, marked by its long exposure to the world beyond Yemen. This division hardened in the 20th century. North Yemen emerged from Ottoman collapse as a conservative, isolated state. South Yemen, shaped by British withdrawal, became the Arab world's only Marxist republic. Two Yemens, facing different directions, suspicious of each other. separated by ideology and history. When they unified in the early 1990s, the merger looked decisive on paper. On the ground, it was fragile from the start. Power centralized. Resources did not. Oil discoveries brought revenue, but not stability. Patronage networks deepened. Regional grievances sharpened. And beneath it all, Yemen's fundamental pressures remained. Limited water, fast population growth, and an economy dependent on imports. The state was present, but thin. Then the pressure broke. The conflict that erupted in the 2010s did not come from nowhere. It followed decades of unresolved tension, uneven development, and political exclusion. What began as a power struggle rapidly became something else, regionalized, internationalized, and devastating. Airstrikes reshaped skylines. Blockades restricted fuel and food. Infrastructure that had taken generations to build vanished in moments. The human cost has been immense. Cities emptied. Villages absorbed the displaced. Health systems collapsed under strain. Diseases that had been controlled returned. In Yemen, war is not a distant front. It is woven into daily life, into the calculation of whether water will flow, whether a road is passable, whether night will be quiet. And yet, people remain. In mountain villages accessible only by narrow tracks, families still farm terraces their ancestors carved centuries ago. In cities, markets reopen days after bombardment. Fishermen still launch boats into dangerous waters. This persistence is not romantic. It is necessary. Yemenis do not endure because of ideology. They endure because leaving is often impossible, and staying is the only option left. Culturally, Yemen remains distinct within the Arab world. Poetry is spoken aloud and remembered, not just written. Architecture is adapted to climate, not fashion. Social life is structured around community and negotiation. Even the much-discussed cat sessions, hours spent chewing stimulant leaves, are less about the plant than about the gathering, the exchange of news, the maintenance of social ties, and fractured environment. Yemen's landscapes mirror its history. The island of Socotra drifts in the Arabian Sea like a fragment from another planet, home to plant species found nowhere else on Earth. Dragon blood trees rise like inverted umbrellas. Isolation preserved them. On the mainland, wadis cut deep channels through rock, filling suddenly during rare rains, then vanishing again into dust. Everything here is shaped by scarcity. Water defines Yemen's future as much as war. Aquifers are dropping. Rainfall is unpredictable. Ancient systems struggle to support modern populations. In Sana'a, the question of whether the city can remain viable is not abstract. It is measured in meters below ground. In Yemen, environmental collapse does not wait politely behind political solutions. It advances at the same time. International attention comes and goes. Headlines flare, then fade. Yemen is often described in numbers, casualties, percentages, funding gaps. But numbers flatten a place that is anything but flat. This is a land where history piles up rather than clears away, where each era leaves structures, physical and social, that the next must navigate. Yemen is not defined only by war. Though war dominates the present, it is defined by its position at the edge of continents, by mountains that break authority into pockets, by trade routes that once made it indispensable, and by communities that learned long ago how to survive without certainty. Leaving Yemen in thought means pulling back to the widest view. The Arabian Peninsula tapers southward. The Red Sea opens. Africa lies just across the water. For millennia, people moved through this space. Merchants, pilgrims, sailors, soldiers. Yemen was never isolated from the world. It was entangled with it. Today, that entanglement feels heavier than ever. Regional rivalries play out on Yemeni ground. Global trade passes its shores. Decisions made far away shape daily life here. And still, in stone cities and mountain fields, life continues at human scale. Yemen does not ask to be pitied. It demands to be understood on its own terms, across its full depth of time and terrain. A country ancient before it was modern, fractured but not erased, wounded but still inhabited. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Beyond the headlines, beyond the maps shaded in conflict colors, Yemen reveals itself in moments that never make reports. A man unlocking his shop at dawn, even though he does not know if customers will come. A woman baking flatbread over a small fire, calculating how much flour must last a week. Children memorizing lessons by voice when paper runs out. These are not symbols. They are routines. And routines are how Yemen keeps going. Conversation in Yemen carries weight. Words matter because agreements often depend on them. In villages, disputes are not rushed toward courts or documents. They move through elders, through mediation, through long discussions where honor matters as much as outcome. Resolution is slow, but violence is not the first instinct. That surprises outsiders. Yemen is often portrayed as inherently volatile, yet its social fabric is built to prevent collapse, not encourage it. Tribal identity is frequently misunderstood. It is not chaos. It is structure. Tribes in Yemen function as social insurance, legal system, and security net when the state fails or withdraws. Loyalty runs horizontally, not upward. That has made centralized rule difficult for centuries, but has also allowed communities to survive repeated political failures. When governments fall, tribes remain. This is why Yemen has never been fully conquered in the way empires intended. Armies could take cities. They could not absorb the mountains. Authority thinned with altitude. Control weakened with every bend in the road. And in that space, local autonomy hardened into tradition. Even today, travel inside Yemen follows old logic. Distance is not measured in kilometers, but in effort. A short stretch of road can take hours. A mountain village may be closer miles than a coastal town, yet feel far more remote. Geography dictates relationships. It decides who marries whom, who trade with whom, who helps when trouble comes. Food in Yemen reflects this closeness to land and limit. Meals are simple but deliberate. Stews simmer for hours because fuel is precious and meals must count. Bread is never wasted. Salt, spices, and chili paste transform scarcity into flavor. Eating is communal, from shared plates, reinforcing bonds in a place where isolation can be dangerous. Music and poetry remain central even now. In times of hardship, Yemenis recite verses not as performance, but as communication. Poetry carries memory, protest, praise, grief. It compresses complex emotion into rhythm that can be remembered when writing cannot. In a land where electricity is uncertain, oral culture endures. Time in Yemen feels layered. The past is not distant. It sits beside the present, visible in buildings still used, in customs still practiced, in routes still followed. Modernity arrived unevenly here. Some regions leapt ahead briefly, then stalled. Others barely changed at all. This unevenness created tension, especially among youth who saw glimpses of a connected world without the means to fully enter it. That generational pressure mattered. Young Yemenis grew up more educated than their parents, more aware of global expectations, but with fewer opportunities. This gap between awareness and possibility fed frustration long before violence erupted. It is easy to frame Yemen's crisis as political. It is equally economic. Social and generational. When conflict intensified, it accelerated everything already fragile. Migration increased. Families split across borders. Remittances became lifelines. Entire professions vanished as supply chains broke. Doctors drove taxis. Engineers sold vegetables. Skills remained, but systems collapsed around them. And yet, ingenuity followed. Informal networks replaced formal ones. Aid was rerouted through community trust. Repair happened with scavenged parts and shared labor. Yemenis did not wait for stability to return. They adapted to instability itself. This adaptability has limits. Prolonged crisis erodes even the strongest coping mechanisms. Children growing up amid constant disruption learn resilience, but they also inherit trauma. Education gaps widen quietly. Health problems accumulate invisibly. The damage is not always immediate. It unfolds over decades. Outside Yemen, the country is often described as strategic. Inside Yemen, people describe it as home. That difference matters. Strategy tolerates loss. Home does not. When ports are blocked or roads destroyed, it is not an abstract move. It is milk that does not arrive, medicine that expires at checkpoints, a wedding postponed, a funeral delayed. Still, Yemenis joke. Humor survives in unexpected places. Sarcasm softens despair. Laughter breaks tension during long power outages. These moments are not denial. They are release. Even in the hardest environments, people find ways to assert humanity. The sea remains both promise and danger. Along the coast, fishing communities depend on waters that are increasingly unpredictable. Storms intensify. Access fluctuates. But the sea also connects Yemen outward, reminding it that it is not sealed off in the world. Even when it feels forgotten, on the island communities and remote coasts, isolation brings a different rhythm. News arrives late. Change moves slowly. Traditions hold longer. These places feel like pauses in a country otherwise under strain. They show what Yemen might look like without constant interference. Still poor, still challenged, but less compressed by conflict. Looking forward, Yemen's future is uncertain not because it lacks solutions, but because solutions require time and consistency. Two things Yemen has been denied. Rebuilding is not just about infrastructure. It is about trust. Trust between regions. Trust between citizens and authority. Trust that effort will not be erased again. Yemen has rebuilt before. After dam collapses. After invasions. After internal wars. Each time, it reshaped itself smaller or leaner but intact. History suggests recovery is possible. It does not promise speed. The danger is simplification. When Yemen is reduced to a single narrative, failed state, humanitarian disaster, proxy battleground, it loses dimension. And when a place loses dimension, it becomes easier to ignore. Yemen resists that flattening. It is too complex, too old, too stubborn. Leaving Yemen, even in thought, feels unfinished. There is no neat conclusion here. No clean arc from past to present to future. Only continuation. People waking up tomorrow. Markets opening. Arguments resuming. Repairs attempted. Life proceeding unevenly but insistently. Yemen endures not because it is unbreakable, but because it has learned how to bend without disappearing. In a world that often moves on quickly, Yemen remains, waiting, adapting, surviving in real time. And that is the story that continues. Night in Yemen arrives quickly. There is little ceremony to it. One moment the land is washed in pale gold. The next it folds into shadow. In places without electricity, darkness is complete. Villages become clusters of quiet voices. Cities dim rather than glow. The absence of light changes behavior. Movement slows. Conversations gather inward. Yemen at night feels older, closer to the rhythms that govern life before wires and switches. It is in these hours that stories surface. Elders speak of years when rain came on time, of harvests that filled storerooms, of journeys made without fear of checkpoints or airstrikes. These stories are not nostalgia for a perfect past. They are reminders that change is possible because change has happened before. Memory becomes a form of resistance. Morning reverses everything. The first call to prayer moves across rooftops and valleys, echoed and reshaped by terrain. People rise not because conditions are good, but because the day demands it. Water must be fetched, animals tended, goods moved while roads are passable. Time is not abstract here. It is measured in windows of safety and opportunity. In Yemen, nothing is wasted, not time, not material, not knowledge. Broken objects are repaired until repair is no longer imaginable. Then their parts are reused. Skills are passed down informally, through observation rather than instruction. A child learns by watching, not because schooling is dismissed, but because learning cannot wait for stability. This pragmatism shapes how Yemenis see the world. There is little patience for distant promises. What matters is what works now, with what is available. This mindset frustrates outside planners who arrive with models and timelines. Yemen does not move on schedule. It moves when conditions allow. Trust follows the same logic. It is personal, earned slowly, and withdrawn quickly if broken. Contracts mean less than reputation. A person's word carries weight because written systems have failed too often. In an environment where institutions rise and fall, relationships endure. That endurance is tested constantly. When conflict disrupts supply routes, prices spike overnight. When fuel runs short, water pumps fail. When water fails, everything else follows. These chains are understood instinctively. People prepare as much as they can, but preparation has limits. Eventually, families make choices no one should have to make, between schooling and food, medicine and transport, staying and leaving. Leaving Yemen is not simple. Borders are barriers, not gateways. For those who do leave, return is uncertain. Distance stretches connections thin. Identity becomes divided between memory and survival. The diaspora carries Yemen with it. But carrying is not the same as living. Those who stay shoulder a different weight. They become caretakers of place, of homes that cannot be abandoned, of graves that must be visited, of traditions that only survive if practiced. Staying is not always a choice. but it becomes one through persistence. Women in Yemen often bear the quietest burdens. They manage households under impossible conditions. They adapt roles fluidly, caregivers, earners, negotiators, without recognition. Their labor keeps families functioning even as systems collapse. This work is rarely visible, yet absolutely central. Children grow up fast here, not because childhood disappears, but because responsibility arrives early. Many learn to navigate adult conversations before adolescence. They absorb stress alongside lessons. Their resilience is praised, but resilience should never be required at this scale. Education continues in fragments. Classrooms open when possible. Lessons compress. Teachers improvise. Learning happens in courtyards, mosques, homes. Knowledge is valued deeply, even when formal paths are blocked. Yemen knows that rebuilding requires minds as much as materials. Religion, often misunderstood from the outside, plays a complex role. Faith offers structure where governance fails. It provides language for endurance, charity, restraint. But it is not a single voice. Interpretations vary by region, by community, by history. Religion in Yemen is lived, not uniform. What outsiders often miss is how deeply Yemenis understand complexity. This is not a society confused by its contradictions. It is fluent in them. Loyalty can be layered. Opinions can shift with context. Survival requires flexibility of thought as much as action. This fluency does not erase anger. There is anger at leaders, at foreign powers, at fate itself. But anger rarely becomes nihilism. Destruction is understood too well to be romanticized. Even armed groups speak the language of restoration, however contradictory their methods. Rebuilding Yemen will not be a moment. It will be a generation-long process of repair, negotiation, and patience. Roads must be rebuilt, yes, but so must trust. Schools must reopen, but so must belief in continuity. Peace will not arrive as an announcement. It will appear gradually, in small decisions to invest, to return, to plan beyond tomorrow. Yemen's geography ensures it will remain important. Its position near vital sea lanes guarantees attention. The question is whether that attention will ever center the people who live there, rather than the routes that pass by them. There is no single Yemen. There are many Yemens layered over the same ground. Urban and rural, coastal and highland, traditional and adaptive, wounded and stubbornly alive. Any attempt to reduce it to one story fails. As the day ends again, shadows stretch across terraces and rooftops. Smoke rises from evening fires. Conversations slow. Another day passes without resolution, but not without effort. Yemen continues not because the world watches, But because its people do, they wake, they work, they argue, they hope cautiously, they endure deliberately. This is not a conclusion. Yemen does not offer one yet. It remains unfinished, unresolved, and still here. Dawn in Yemen does not announce itself with spectacle. It arrives quietly, slipping between rooftops and ridgelines, touching stone before skin. The air is cooler then, briefly forgiving. It smells of dust and with smoke, of yesterday's cooking fires stirred back to life. This is the hour when the country exhales. Work begins early because delay is costly. Bakers move first. The sound of dough slap flat, ovens opening, bread blistering. Drivers check engines that may or may not hold through the day. Shopkeepers lift metal shutters, scarred by years of use. Not all shops open. No one comments on which remain closed. Absence has become familiar. Money in Yemen circulates differently now. Formal salaries fade. Informal exchange fills the gaps. Credit is personal, not institutional. A shopkeeper knows who will pay later and who will not. Debts are tracked by memory, not ledgers. The system runs on trust stretched thin, but still intact. When trust breaks, it echoes far beyond a single transaction. Craftsmanship survives in pockets. Carpenters shaping doors by hand. Silversmiths working with recycled metal. Masons cutting stone to fit without mortar. These skills were never hobbies. They were necessities. In a place where imports fail, hands must remember how to build. Homes reflect this logic. They grow upward instead of outward, conserving land and heat. Windows are small, deliberate. Decoration is minimal but precise. Nothing is accidental. Even beauty is functional here, meant to cool rooms, diffuse light, signal belonging. Sound defines Yemen as much as sight. The echo of footsteps in narrow alleys. The hum of generators cutting in and out. The sudden stillness when fuel runs dry. In rural areas, sound travels farther. A distant call carries across valleys. News arrives by voice before it arrives by phone. Seasons are subtle but decisive. A few weeks of rain can change everything. Fields green briefly, optimism lifting just enough to hurt when it fades. Too much rain brings floods. Too little brings dust. Balance is rare. Extremes are familiar. In coastal areas, humidity presses down relentlessly. Inland, dryness cracks skin and lips. People adjust without comment. Complaining implies expectation. Expectation invites disappointment. Better to adapt quietly. The past is present in unexpected ways. Coffee, now a global ritual, once moved outward from these highlands. Long before cafes and branding, beans were grown, dried, traded here. The world learned to drink, then forgot its source. Yemen remembers. Even now, small farms cling to the tradition, producing little, but producing anyway. Continuity matters more than scale. Markets reveal the country's contradictions. Stalls stacked with fruit beside shelves half empty. Imported goods beside handmade replacements. Prices debated fiercely, but rarely angrily. Bargaining is theater and necessity combined. It maintains dignity on both sides. Transportation remains an exercise in patience. Vehicles are overloaded, roads uneven, journeys uncertain. People plan with buffers of time rather than schedules. Arrival matters more than punctuality. This flexibility frustrates outsiders. It saves locals. Technology exists unevenly. Smartphones glow in dark rooms. Messages arrive hours late. Batteries are guarded like valuables. Connectivity is intermittent, but when it works, it collapses distance instantly. News travels faster now, but clarity does not always follow. Information without stability can feel heavier than ignorance. Rumors spread easily in gaps left by silence. People cross-check constantly, comparing versions, reading tone. Truth becomes something negotiated socially. This is not cynicism. It is survival in an environment where official statements have often misled. Generosity persists, even under strain. Guests are still offered food, even when supplies are low. Hospitality is not optional. It is identity. Refusing to share would mean something has truly broken. Yemen has not reached that point. Conflict changes how people imagine the future. Long-term plans shrink. Weddings are modest. Construction pauses mid-wall. Life is lived in phases rather than arcs. But hope does not disappear. It adapts. Hope becomes conditional, cautious, but persistent. There's fatigue, deep layer fatigue, not the kind that sleep fixes, the kind that settles into posture, into speech. Yet alongside it is alertness. People are attentive to shifts, to opportunities, to danger. Yemen is tired, but not unaware. Art continues quietly. Not galleries or exhibitions, but decoration on doors, patterns in clothing, rhythm in speech. Creativity does not announce itself. It integrates. Expression finds cracks to grow through. When aid arrives, it reshapes behavior temporarily. Cues form, expectations spike. Then aid leaves and adjustment follows. Yemen has learned not to rely fully on what comes from outside. Dependency is dangerous when support is inconsistent. Justice operates locally more often than formally. Conflicts are settled through mediation, compensation, apology. This system is imperfect, but it functions when courts do not. It values restoration over punishment. In a society that cannot afford endless feuds, resolution matters. Fear exists, but it is not constant panic. It is situational, calibrated. People learn where to avoid, when to move, how to read the day. This knowledge is shared informally, passed like advice rather than warnings. Even joy finds space. Children play with improvised toys. Music plays at gatherings. Laughter breaks unexpectedly. These moments are not naive. They are deliberate acts of normalcy. As night returns, lamps flicker on where power allows. Elsewhere, stars dominate. The sky feels close without light pollution. Conversations drift upward, quieter now. Another day is assessed, measured, folded into memory. Yemen does not ask the world to solve it. It asks to be seen clearly, without distortion or haste. It is not frozen in tragedy, nor defined by resilience alone. It is complex, adaptive, burdened, alive. And tomorrow, before dawn, it will begin again. There is a moment in Yemen when the noise drops away, not because things are calm, but because everyone is listening. It happens when rumors of change surface. A ceasefire, a reopening, a shipment expected, a road rumored to be passable again. Conversations pause mid-sentence. People wait for confirmation, not from screens, but from each other. One phone rings. Someone steps outside. A neighbor leans in. Information spreads sideways, not downward. Hope moves carefully here. Years of disruption have taught Yemenis that sudden optimism can be dangerous. It invites disappointment. So hope is tested before it is trusted. It is weighed against experience. If it survives that test, it is allowed to stay. This caution shapes how people talk about the future. You will rarely hear grand plans. Instead, you hear conditional sentences. If the road opens, if fuel arrives, if the school stays open, the future is imagined in fragments that can be rearranged if necessary. This does not mean Yemen lacks vision. It means vision has learned to stay flexible. In cities, entire neighborhoods operate on shared understanding. Which generators are still running? Which bakeries have flour? Which clinic can still treat without charge? This knowledge is updated constantly, like an informal map redrawn every day. Survival depends on accuracy. In rural areas, isolation creates different pressures. A broken pump can mean days without water. A damaged road can cut off supplies entirely. Here, cooperation is not optional. Disagreements are postponed because urgency overrides pride. Yemen's social system compress under stress, but they do not vanish. People carry multiple roles. A farmer may also be a driver. A teacher may repair electronics. A shopkeeper may mediate disputes. Specialization gives way to versatility. This adaptability is not celebrated. It is assumed. Loss is everywhere, but it is rarely displayed. Grief is private, controlled. Public breakdowns disrupt others who are already stretched thin. So people grieve quietly, often at night, often alone. Strength becomes a social obligation, yet memory insists on surfacing. People remember weddings interrupted, businesses that once thrived, streets that were once crowded at night. These memories are not always painful. Sometimes they are comforting, proof that Yemen once moved differently and might again. There is anger toward power, but it is diffuse. It does not always know where to land. Leaders change. Conditions do not. This disconnect creates cynicism, but also sharp political awareness. Yemenis understand manipulation. They have lived under it too long not to. Outside narratives often frame Yemen as broken. Inside, the word used more often is suspended. Life is paused, not erased. Plans are delayed, not abandoned. This distinction matters deeply to those who live here. Children born during conflict grow up thinking uncertainty is normal. They adapt quickly, but this normalization carries risk. When instability becomes baseline, expectations shrink. Rebuilding must confront not only physical damage, but diminished belief in continuity. Still, aspiration appears in quiet forms. A child learning another language. A teenager repairing a computer with scavenged parts. A family investing in education despite no guarantee of return. These acts signal belief in a future that has not yet arrived. Religion continues to shape daily rhythm, but it does not simplify moral choices. Faith provides structure, not answers. It offers patience, not immunity. People pray and then act, knowing prayer alone does not fix roads or refill tanks. Food remains a focal point of dignity. Even when portions are small, presentation matters. Bread is placed carefully. Meals are shared evenly. Eating together reinforces equality when other systems fail. Conflict has altered gender dynamics in subtle ways. Women take on public roles out of necessity, not ideology. This shift is rarely framed as empowerment. It is framed as responsibility. Whether these changes endure will shape Yemen's social future. Migration continues to pull families apart. Those who leave send money, advice, encouragement. Those who stay send updates, gratitude, longing. Distance reshapes relationships, but does not sever them. Yemen exists beyond its borders now, carried in voice messages and memories. At times, silence becomes the loudest presence. Power outages stretch for hours. Streets empty early. The absence of sound amplifies thought. In these moments, people reflect on endurance, on loss, on the strange fact that life continues at all. Nature offers no commentary. Mountains remain unmoved by politics. The sea keeps its own schedule. Rain falls when it does. Yemen's landscape has outlasted every conflict it has hosted. This perspective humbles, but also steadies. Reconstruction, when it begins in earnest, will face hard truths. Some things cannot be restored to what they were. Cities will rebuild differently. Communities will change shape. Yemen's future will not mirror its past. It will have to negotiate with it. What Yemen asks of the world is not rescue, but patience. Not slogans, but consistency. Not pity, but partnership that respects local knowledge. Solutions imposed from above fracture. Solutions grown from within endure. There is no singular voice of Yemen. There are many, overlapping, sometimes contradicting. This plurality is not weakness. It is realism. Yemen has always been a mosaic, not a monolith. As another day closes, lights flicker off where fuel runs out. Elsewhere, generators hum late into the night. Conversations fade. The country settles, not into peace, but into rest. Tomorrow will bring its own negotiations, with weather, with resources, with each other. Yemen will meet them as it always has. Cautiously, collectively, imperfectly. Still here, still moving. And the story continues not as a conclusion, but as a living process, unfinished, unresolved, and